faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today we're exploring the book Death in Venice. In the summer of 1950, a 75-year-old man arrived in Zurich, Switzerland. He was married. He had been a father to 6 children for 45 years and was also a world-renowned writer. He was scheduled to give speeches, write novels, grant interviews, while worrying about the Korean War and American politics. His wife faced surgery, and he himself was constantly troubled by various ailments. In short, this man was burdened with heaps of problems and worries. Yet one day, he encountered a 19-year-old hotel waiter whose appearance, gaze, and gentle Bavarian accent profoundly shook the elderly writer. At that moment, he suddenly felt his global reputation meant nothing. His concerns for his ill wife became secondary, and the Korean War and world politics he cared about turned insignificant. He wrote in his diary, "Then let there be more. Let there be love again, to be moved by someone and pursue them wholeheartedly." This elderly writer was Germany's Thomas Mann. Thomas Mann, the most renowned German novelist of the 20th century and 1929 Nobel laureate, was born in 1875 to a wealthy merchant family in Lübeck, northern Germany. In 1901, at 26, he published the epic novel Buddenbrooks. Its massive 500,000-word scope and realistic style catapulted him to fame. In 1912, he published Death in Venice, the very novel we're discussing today, later adapted to film, gaining further international attention. Later works like The Magic Mountain, Joseph and His Brothers, Latte in Weimar, and Dr. Faustus consistently explored themes of death, illness, and same-sex desire. That Let There Be Love Again represented the eruption of his long-suppressed homosexual passion, which he channeled into his fiction. Among these, the most outstanding and autobiographical is his 1912 masterpiece, Death in Venice. Death in Venice remains, after Buddenbrooks, Mann's most translated, widely reviewed, and influential work. Not only is it hailed by German literary circles as a modern classic, but Mann himself declared, "It is indeed a veritable masterpiece." The novel radiates such an alluring brilliance that even the author himself is dazzled by it. I'll first outline the plot, then analyze 4 aspects: the autobiographical, moral, and artistic themes of the boy's love, the European cultural context, and the novel's exploration of life and death to uncover its depth. Death in Venice has 5 chapters. Chapter 1 introduces renowned writer Gustav von Aschenbach in his 50s, granted nobility for his exceptional novels. But he finds himself increasingly weary, with both life and creativity at an impasse, on a certain spring afternoon after intense work. Having wandered Munich streets all morning, Aschenbach spots a peculiar traveler at a northern tram stop, suddenly igniting his wanderlust. Aschenbach resolves to journey to Italy. Chapter 2 revisits Aschenbach's life. His paternal ancestors were stern officials, his maternal line artists. Shaped by both, he cultivated rigorous discipline. Persistence to the end became his creed. He always believed persevering heroes embodied artistic perfection. Chapter 3 recounts Aschenbach's Italian travels. Dining in a Venice hotel lobby, he encounters Polish aristocrat Tadzio's family. Enchanted by the boy's beauty, yet fearing temptation, Aschenbach departs, only to return ecstatically when luggage issues reunite him with Tadzio. Chapter 4 details Aschenbach's deepening obsession. He revels in beachside life, watching Tadzio daily with growing fervor. Gradually, he senses Tadzio becoming aware of his presence. When Tadzio smiles faintly at him, Aschenbach is utterly transfixed. He whispers, "I love you." Chapter 5 delivers the tragic finale. Venice, the novel reveals, is gripped by Indian cholera. As plague spreads, Aschenbach, consumed by passion, ignores all danger, fixated only on nearing the beautiful boy. He relentlessly stalked the beautiful boy, disregarding all manners and customs. Once, after eating overripe strawberries, he seemed to contract cholera, frequently experiencing bouts of dizziness. What? Finally, upon hearing Tadzio's family was leaving, he returned to the beach. Lying on a deck chair, he gazed at Tadzio one last time, then passed away, motionless. The plot of Death in Venice is simple, yet beneath Thomas Mann's delicate prose, it reads as a sort of autobiography he wrote for himself. Aschenbach's profession, writing approach, and conceived works all mirror Thomas Mann himself. In May 1911, Thomas Mann vacationed in Italy with his wife and elder brother, Heinrich Mann. This experience closely parallels the novel. Many events and characters stemmed from Mann's life, even the detail of extended hotel stays due to lost luggage. Anne, too, encountered Polish noble youth Władysław Moes at a Venice hotel, instantly captivated by him. The boy's nickname was Tadzio, which Mann directly used for the novel's character. So, Mann's wife later admitted in her memoirs that reality matched the novel's depiction almost exactly. At 35, Thomas Mann was already among the finest German language writers. He was then conceiving a novel about Frederick the Great and a treatise titled Spirit and Art. Neither was completed, but Mann incorporated both into the novel as Aschenbach's works. Here, Mann first confronted his attraction to adolescent boys, what's termed pederasty. Though we might view it as homosexuality today, pederasty was an openly acknowledged social institution in ancient Greece, even a prevalent custom. This relationship typically involved an adult man and an adolescent. Though potentially including sexual contact, its core purpose was civic and moral education, the elder guiding the youth into manhood as mentor. Per Plato's theory, Platonic love originally meant the love between an adult man and a beautiful youth.
Plato considered this affection noble and precious aesthetically, the youth embodying beauty itself.
He says that through this sacred exploration of beauty, people begin with individual beauty, inevitably finding the ladder to heaven, ascending step by step, ultimately grasping what true beauty is. This theory greatly influenced later European literary and aesthetic theories. As written in the novel, when writer Aschenbach closely observes Tadzio by the sea, he feels ecstatically that he has glimpsed the true essence of beauty at first sight. God uses the form and complexion of human youth to vividly reveal the spiritual and ethereal world, making it unforgettable. He recalls the dialogue between Socrates and Phaedrus. Beauty is the only spiritual image that our senses can perceive and endure. Thus, Aschenbach attempts to write down his epiphany, his brushstrokes following the sacred lines of the boy's body, capturing the boy's beauty on paper and elevating it to the spiritual realm. And thus, though a bit elusive, it's not hard to see that this platonic pursuit of love and beauty is precisely a theme the novel aims to reflect. Aschenbach is a writer, and his writing and reflections on art occupy a significant portion of the novel. Thomas Mann deliberately adopts a Greek tragic style. The novel's 5 chapters mimic the traditional Western 5-act play, and its theme is the Greek tragic conflict where the protagonist unexpectedly faces misfortune and clashes with fate, unfit, forming the essence of tragedy. Thomas Mann's understanding of Greek tragedy stems from the philosopher Nietzsche. According to Nietzsche, Greek tragedy originates from the spirits of Apollo, the sun god, and Dionysus, the wine god. Opposition and reconciliation. Apollo represents reason, order, and harmonious art, while Dionysus represents irrationality and primal impulses. Initially, Aschenbach is undoubtedly a writer embodying the Apollonian spirit, rational, restrained, with an instinct to pursue beauty, affirming individual life and artistic beauty. At the first encounter with Tadzio, he observes him from an Apollonian artistic perspective, seeing him as angelically pure and lovely, reminiscent of sculptures from the height of Greek art. His beautiful appearance possesses an unparalleled charm, feeling like he had never seen such exquisitely crafted art. But gradually, Aschenbach is drawn to another force, that of the Dionysian spirit. According to Nietzsche's view, the worship of Dionysus itself carries a melancholic tone, representing intoxication and revelry. In this sense, the strange traveler Aschenbach encounters at the northern cemetery at the novel's start, alongside later figures like the old man dressed as youth, Venetian gondoliers, street-singing baritones, tropical jungles and tigers. Oh, no. Plus Venice's later oriental hues, the plague from India, and frenzied nightmares. All these primitive, wild, depressive elements point squarely to the Dionysian spirit. In the novel, this Dionysian spirit mirrors the protagonist's psyche, dissolution of self, intoxication, and desire, signifying a rejection of reason and order. Aschenbach realizes years of creation haven't brought him joy. He forcibly suppressed emotions to serve his art, yet he longed to escape his rigid, icy daily grind that made his head throb. Precisely this pain plunged him into a creative crisis. His work lacked warmth and ease, so he traveled afar seeking novelty, craving freedom, release, and self-forgetfulness to escape this spiritual crisis. Thus, he embarked on a quest for the Dionysian spirit. After encountering Tadzio, Aschenbach grew intensely agitated. Rationally, he told himself not to succumb, to flee the hotel, Tadzio, Venice. Yet emotionally, he lingered, breathing the air with deep, painful longing. When luggage loss thwarted his departure, he was ecstatic, finally an excuse to silence reason and guiltlessly remain. He felt in an idyllic paradise, savoring freedom, basking in sacred self-moved unity of reason and liberation. But Tadzio's smile shattered him. Aschenbach's reason and dignity crumbled. The Apollonian and Dionysian balance collapsed. To prolong Tadzio's stay, he deliberately hid plague rumors from German papers and the confirmed outbreak he learned at the British travel agency. This immoral act signals the collapse of the Apollonian spirit and the growing dominance of the Dionysian. On the very night he decided to conceal the epidemic's spread, he had a decisive nightmare. In the dream, some savages were making vowel sounds similar to Tadzio's, sweet yet wild. The Dionysian spirit embodied by the savages completely overwhelmed the rational Apollonian spirit. Thus, Aschenbach abandoned all restraint, no longer hiding his actions or caring about suspicion, single-mindedly pursuing his vision of beauty. During one afternoon pursuit, he lost his way and slumped on stone steps amid weeds and garbage, muttering like a madman. "Hey!" The once revered great writer had sunk to such depths. He suddenly realized artists aren't as adept as they claim at merging self-discipline and libertinism. In reality, love had made him more wretched and foolish. Here, Thomas Mann's masterful irony subverts traditional tragedy. Protagonists are often unyielding and heroic. But confronting fate, Aschenbach didn't remain resilient. He grew more foolish. The novel again quotes Socrates. His writings, seemingly dignified and vivid, are actually vanity and nonsense. Using art to educate people in youth is dangerous. It should be forbidden to pursue aesthetic perfection only to deliver anti-aesthetic conclusions, using art's name to ultimately negate art. This is precisely Thomas Mann's unique narrative technique. This irony, this destruction encountered in beauty's pursuit, reflects Europeans' complex psyche. European culture has two major sources: Greco-Roman culture and the Bible. Christian culture? Though pederasty was acceptable in ancient Greece, Europe's Christianization radically transformed ethical views after the classical era. Leviticus states, "If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death." In Christian-dominated Europe, both pederasty and homosexuality were deemed sinful and met severe punishment. In Thomas Mann's era, homosexuality was still considered immoral and subject to legal punishment. From another perspective, Aschenbach's plight reflects the fundamental conflict between conventional bourgeois morality and aesthetic artistic pursuits. Germany has a long tradition of bourgeois culture, emphasizing rationality and self-restraint spiritually, and adhering strictly to ethical morals in daily life. However, since the 19th century, German intellectual elites have launched strong critiques against bourgeois society's utilitarianism and moralism. They viewed bourgeois society as ugly, vulgar, and utilitarian. To counter this, elites championed art, believing only through art could one transcend mundanity, achieve sublime beauty, and grasp the world's essence. Thus, the artist novel became a major genre in German literature, with conflicts between Philistine bourgeoisie and artists as its central theme. Yet many romantic writers portrayed artists with excessive idealism. They thoroughly poeticized or romanticized reality, detaching from truth. As a realist, Thomas Mann avoided this trope, instead focusing on internal moral aesthetic conflicts within one individual, exploring where such contradictions might lead. Here Mann was clearly influenced by Freud. After Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams, his concepts, id, exploration of the subconscious, and dreams as repressed desires, profoundly impacted artists of that era. Freud believed human consciousness comprises three parts. The id represents desires. The ego represents the self. The superego represents moral values. The id represents desires. The ego represents the self. The superego represents moral values. It operates on the pleasure principle, urgently seeking outlets, relentlessly pursuing gratification. The superego represents conscience, social norms, and ideals. It functions on the perfection principle, suppressing id conflicts, pursuing flawlessness. The ego mediates between them, following the reality principle to reconcile id-superego tensions. Restrained by the superego, it satisfies id demands through rational means. In a sense, Death in Venice was crafted using Freudian theory. We note protagonist Aschenbach lived in a state of repressed desire, exhibiting extreme self-discipline. He relentlessly stalked the beautiful boy, disregarding all manners and customs. Once, after eating overripe strawberries, he seemed to contract cholera, frequently experiencing bouts of dizziness. Finally, upon hearing Tadzio's family was leaving, he returned to the beach. Lying on a deck chair, he gazed at Tadzio one last time, then passed away motionless. The plot of Death in Venice is simple, yet beneath Thomas Mann's delicate prose, it reads as a sort of autobiography he wrote for himself. Aschenbach's profession, writing approach, and conceived works all mirror Thomas Mann himself. In May 1911, Thomas Mann vacationed in Italy with his wife and elder brother Heinrich Mann. This experience closely parallels the novel. Many events and characters stemmed from Mann's life, even the detail of extended hotel stays due to lost luggage. Mann, too, encountered Polish noble youth Władysław Moyes at a Venice hotel, instantly captivated by him.
The boy's nickname was Tadzio, which Mann directly used for the novel's character.
Mann's wife later admitted in her memoirs that reality matched the novel's depiction almost exactly. At 35, Thomas Mann was already among the finest German-language writers. He was then conceiving a novel about Frederick the Great and a treatise titled Spirit and Art. Neither was completed, but Mann incorporated both into the novel as Aschenbach's works. Here, Mann first confronted his attraction to adolescent boys, what's termed pederasty. Though we might view it as homosexuality today, pederasty was an openly acknowledged social institution in ancient Greece, even a prevalent custom. This relationship typically involved an adult man and an adolescent. Though potentially including sexual contact, its core purpose was civic and moral education, the elder guiding the youth into manhood as mentor. Per Plato's theory, platonic love originally meant the love between an adult man and a beautiful youth. Plato considered this affection noble and precious aesthetically, the youth embodying beauty itself. Thomas Mann held Gustav Mahler's music in particularly high esteem. When Mahler's 7th and 8th symphonies premiered in Munich, Thomas Mann attended the performances and the celebratory banquets afterward, even writing letters to Mahler expressing deep reverence. He believed Mahler embodied the most solemn and sacred artistic will of their era. Mahler was the very incarnation of art, and the themes of death and eternity in his music deeply influenced Thomas Mann. But in May 1911, Mahler died in Vienna at the age of 51. At that time, Thomas Mann was traveling in Italy. Soon after hearing of Mahler's death, Mann set off for Venice, initiating the story of Death in Venice. One could say the encounter with the Polish boy was the direct trigger. However, Mahler's death as an artist is the true underlying theme of the novel. He named the protagonist Gustav Aschenbach as a tribute to Gustav Mahler. Moreover, Aschenbach's age and appearance in the novel closely matched Mahler's. Aschenbach fell ill in Vienna, and Mahler died in Vienna too, both from viral infections. Thus, when Italian director Luchino Visconti adapted Death in Venice into a film in 1971, he deliberately changed the protagonist's identity from a writer to a composer. For the composer's death scene, Mahler's Fifth Symphony was specifically used as the background music. The novel's opening details Aschenbach observing shops selling crucifixes, monuments, and tombstones while strolling the streets. A Byzantine-style funeral home recites the motto inscribed on its building, "May eternal light shine upon the departed as they enter the kingdom of heaven." He chose to wait for the tram outside the northern cemetery. Both the cemetery and funeral home constantly remind the writer that everyone must confront the ultimate question. Under death's shadow, the survival instinct is awakened. His longing for distant places, his affection for the boy, and his newfound ease in accepting things he once scorned, all stem from a deep attachment to life. Thus, Aschenbach embarked on a path where the Dionysian spirit suppressed the Apollonian, unleashing his id's desires completely. However, Nietzsche noted that amid group revelry, individuals also experience personal suffering. The honor and existence Aschenbach had built as a disciplined writer now faced the risk of crumbling. He was swept into a whirlpool of confusion, intoxication, and loss of dignity. He could no longer return to normal bourgeois society. Only death awaited him. Moreover, his death didn't seem caused by cholera, as symptoms like diarrhea and vomiting described in the book weren't present in Aschenbach. His dizziness wasn't solely physical. It stemmed more from inner despair and hopelessness. Thus, he likely exhausted himself chasing Tadzio, ultimately dying from fatigue. Stendhal once said, "True love often easily and fearlessly evokes thoughts of death. It becomes a price one must pay." In this sense, Aschenbach also exhibited a Greek heroic act, risking death to pursue unattainable love. Although the outcome is death, it doesn't mean our writer's end was tragic.
Quite the opposite.
In his final moments, he saw Tadzio as if winged, soaring through mysterious, hopeful space, and our writer, as usual, followed him in spirit. Here, we faintly see the image of an angel guiding a soul into heaven. Since love couldn't be attained in the real world, only the pure spiritual realm could offer this possibility. And upon learning Tadzio's family was leaving, Aschenbach essentially sought death, as there was no turning back. Let's turn back to Thomas Mann himself. Although married with children, he suffered lifelong torment from unfulfilled love. Remember the 19-year-old waiter Mann encountered in Switzerland, mentioned at the beginning? Later, he sent the boy a letter pretending it might help him professionally and included his address.
The reply made him ecstatic, bringing continuous joy and serving as artistic fuel for his later works.
As Freud pointed out, when the id's desires are painfully suppressed, the ego regulates it, transferring the energy to another object, achieving substitute satisfaction. Thomas Mann used this emotional torment to inspire his creative work. What he truly loved wasn't love itself, but his artistic creation. The nuance of this, perhaps even the writer himself couldn't fully articulate. But anyway, this Death in Venice, with its battle between reason and impulse, its probing questions about art and life and death, can't help but make us, a century later, take a fresh look at ourselves and our lives. All right, that concludes our exploration of Thomas Mann's Death in Venice for you. You'll find reading notes below the audio See you tomorrow.